If Napoleon's army cannot cross the Berezina, they have no choice but to surrender. France's fate hangs in the balance. Napoleon goes to the riverbank several times to observe the fires in the Russian camp. Their number and density reassure him that his plan is working. The Russians think that the main crossing point will be in Borisov, but Studyanka is only a couple of hours' march away for a trained army. The risk of being caught and attacked remains very real. The western bank of the Berezina at Studyanka must be protected. Napoleon orders the 50 members of General Corbineau's cavalry to swim across the river. Each horse also carries an infantryman on its neck. 400 soldiers join the brave cavalryman on makeshift rafts. There is a constant back and forth between the two banks. In parallel, the weakened Russian forces of General Kornilov are crushed by 50 cannon being directly commanded by Napoleon. The western bank is soon cleared. Two hours later, they start to install the uprights. General Eblé leads the way, throwing himself into the icy water. Eblé's heroic bridge builders remove their clothes and get down to work, ignoring the huge blocks of ice floating in the river. These blocks are as sharp as blades, making their task particularly dangerous. The bridge builders are up to their shoulders in the water, installing the uprights. Many lives are lost, abandoned to the current. They are soon replaced by other brave men. By the end of the morning, the infantry bridge is complete. By 1 p.m., Oudinot's troops are crossing the newly constructed bridge. In a hurry to reinforce the western bank, they hasten across the wobbly construction. By 4 p.m., the second bridge is completed beside the first. By the evening, almost 10,000 soldiers have crossed the bridge and reached the west bank of the river. Night falls, and they must take advantage of the darkness. Wagons and cannon are brought across the river. The bridge vibrates and 3 times gives way, failing to support the weight. The loyal bridge builders jump back in the water to repair or replace the broken parts. It's a race against time, and the temperature is minus 30 degrees as they fix the bridge in under 3 hours. Napoleon and his general staff crossed to the west bank later on, continuing to encourage the never-ending flow across the bridge. This morning, Napoleon's orders were clear. Only ordered army troops are to cross. The rest, hawkers, stragglers, and non-combatants, are roughly pushed back. After several days of solitary marching, Sergeant Bourgogne eventually meets up again with his companions. He joins non-combatants and stragglers who have been waiting since the previous day to cross the bridge. One witness wrote, "Those who entered Russia to fight barbarism and introduce civilization are now nothing more than debris, pathetic ghosts." During the night of 27th of November, something incredible happens. There's virtually nobody pushing to cross the bridge. The way across is clear. But an exhausted and feverish Bourgogne is asleep beside a fire. At dawn, he is woken by cannon fire. He then understands that to be in with a chance of survival, he absolutely must cross the bridge. Better die from a cannonball than from cold or hunger. At 7 a.m., completely alone, he gets up, takes his gun, and without saying a word to anyone, goes towards the bridge. His limbs are frozen, his bones as fragile as glass, making walking extremely difficult. Sergeant Bourgogne remembers. I saw women demonstrating admirable courage, tolerating pain. Some even put men to shame, men who did not know how to tolerate adversity with bravery and resignation. I crossed the Berezina River on a totally deserted bridge. When I reached the other side, I saw on my right a large shack made from planks. It was there that the Emperor had slept, and where he still was. Bourgogne reaches the west bank and joins his comrades. But little does he know that 4 hours later, the nightmare would begin all over again. On the same side of the river, General Chichagov and 27,000 men are swooping down on Oudinot's troops. The fight is a terrible one. Oudinot must remain in control of the western bank at all costs, it being a vital crossing point. At the same moment on the east bank, General Wittgenstein is leading 40,000 soldiers to attack Marshal Victor's 40,000 troops as the rear guard has stayed near to Studyanka. Napoleon's army is trapped. It is panic on the eastern bank. In the middle of the fighting and cannon fire, thousands of stragglers and non-combatants who have been waiting for 2 days race pell-mell onto the ramps leading to the bridges. Terrified men, women and children are shot down by cannon fire, trampled by horses, or fall from the slippery wooden structures. Grande Armée surgeon Baron de Larrey remembers, the horror was everywhere. The strongest killed the weakest, who were crushed beneath the feet of the crowd. The air was filled with terrible screams. A few managed to swim across, but others drowned, and more still were trapped by the floating blocks of ice. The ferocious fighting continues until 11 p.m. to the sound of cannon and gunfire in a terrible snowstorm. At the end of one exhausting day, heavy with loss, the Russian armies are pushed back, and Napoleon controls both sides of the Berezina.
At the Battle of Berezina, Napoleon took a decision as head of the army. It was the only option open to him. He wanted to save his army and continue his military campaign. The stragglers did not want to cross the bridges at night, and the Russians were coming, so he gave the order to burn the bridges.
During the night, General Eblé urges the survivors on the east bank to cross the last bridge that can still be crossed.
Eblé was a remarkable man. By that, I mean he was devoted to his cause, extremely devoted to the emperor, but at the same time, he was a deeply humane person. And when Napoleon gave him the order to burn the bridges, he knew very well what that meant. It meant that thousands of people would be left to the violence of the Cossacks.
The fatal command, burn the bridges. Seeing the Cossacks approaching, General Eblé accepts that he must do it, but he is sick at heart. In the first flames, there is a mad scramble to cross the bridge. The stragglers are running all over the place. A disordered and confused crowd of people stumbles around. 12,000 stragglers and non-combatants and around 3,000 fighters are desperately fighting to survive. As seen by the powerless spectators on the right bank, this is a spectacle of horror and suffering. It's a free-for-all, these unfortunate souls caught between two evils, cornered by the Cossacks who are not giving an inch and trapped by the flaming bridges. There is no way forward and no way back. In the rush, the bridge collapses. Men, women, and children are consumed by flames or drowned in the icy water. The death toll is catastrophic. Kutuzov missed his chance at the Berezina. 7,000 of Napoleon's soldiers and 2,000 of his officers, his imperial guard, his marshals, and his high command managed to escape 3 Russian armies of many more men.
Napoleon had lost no battles, but he had lost his entire campaign. More than 600,000 were gone either dead or taken prisoner in Russia. That was the result of this campaign.
In fact, for the Russians, the Battle of Berezina was a failure because they wanted to capture Napoleon.
The Battle of the Berezina is both a disaster for the French army and a victory, indeed in many ways its proudest moment. Of course, thousands of French soldiers die at the Berezina. But what really matters is that the core of the French army escapes. And by the core of the French army, I mean its generals, its staff officers, its vital professional cadre. Napoleon was able to put together a very formidable new army in 1813. So it was a French victory of a sort.
On the 5th of December, day 48 of the retreat, Napoleon, who can no longer bear not knowing what is happening in the capital, takes the decision to return to Paris. He orders Caulaincourt to accompany him. In 10 days and 10 nights, they reach Germany. After crossing the Duchy of Warsaw, they stop over in Germany. Incognito, they hope.
As soon as I'm back in Paris, I'll reassure my people and explain to them the reasons for our battles. Caulaincourt. Events have proven you right, Caulaincourt. But I didn't lead this campaign like some Don Quixote in search of adventures, no. The only difference between me and other sovereigns is that problems stand in their way, whereas I like to overcome them, especially when the rewards are grand and noble, worthy of me and the nation. If it hadn't been for the weather, the Russians would have capitulated. Look, our disasters were limited to a week. We stayed a week too long in Moscow, but nothing is over. We'll prove ourselves yet.
Do you not think we should...
I know what you think of me, Caulaincourt, but I have no more ambition. I'm too old for it, believe me. I yearn to rest. But I want to finish my oeuvre.
Übrigens.
Ja?
Wir sind jetzt schon 2 Stunden hier. Wo bleiben denn die Pferde?
Pferde sind gleich gesattelt, mein Herr.
Ich kann doch kaum glauben, dass diese Post über kein Pferd verfügt. Und dass Meilenwein kein zu finden ist.
Die Zeiten sind hart, mein Herr. Das ist Napoleons Schuld. Gerade heute Morgen haben uns Plünderer schon wieder 2 Reitpferde gestohlen.
Convinced the innkeeper is deliberately holding them up, Caulaincourt fears an ambush.
Ich weiß, dass du Pferde hast. Wo versteckst du sie?
Ich sagte, ich habe keine.
Wenn sie in
ich hab
5
doch...
Minuten nicht gesattelt sind, dann schlitz ich dich auf.
In Ordnung, kommt sofort.
Three days later, Napoleon enters the Tuileries. Meanwhile, the Grande Armée continues to beat a retreat through the snowy, marshy and icy forests, still pursued and harassed by the Cossacks and Kutuzov's troops.
The French population had no doubts about Napoleon after 1812. In fact, it didn't doubt Napoleon right until the end, until 1814. This was in part down to Napoleon being relatively popular. He was extremely popular even, but in particular, the people really trusted him. He was, after all, a man who had spent the last 12 years winning every battle he fought, so people thought that in Russia he'd slipped up because of the winter, despite it not only being down to the winter, and that the emperor would fix everything.
The Russia campaign marked the start of the decline of the First Empire. 2 years later, the English would win the Battle of Waterloo, and France would be reduced to its pre-1790 frontiers. However, it was the start of a new era for Russia, which found a new place as a major global power. A year later, and this patriotic war had helped Russia forge a national identity that was celebrated by writers and musicians alike.
Being used to success cost us dear in Russia. We had never learned to beat a retreat. During this long debacle, the Emperor was as unsure and undecided on the first day as he was on the last. Fate had so often smiled upon him that he was never able to believe it might betray him.
If you count the survivors from the Battle of the Berezina and the troops stationed in Lithuania, fewer than 30,000 crossed back over the Niemen River. 30,000 out of 500,000 6 months earlier. More than 200,000 soldiers from the Grande Armée died in combat, from the cold, from hunger, or from sickness. More than 150,000 were taken prisoner. On the Russian side, the losses were set at 300,000 dead, half of whom were killed in combat. Sergeant Bourgogne remembers. The Battle of the Berezina was not the end of our struggle. I was taken prisoner a short time later. The Russians decided to send us east, towards Siberia. My unlucky companions thought it better to be held captive and fed potatoes than to die free men from cold or hunger on the march. But I pointed out to them that it would be much better to escape their clutches. Several thousand of us died before reaching Siberia. Others accepted the Tsar's offer to take Russian nationality and settle in this land they had been asked to conquer. As for me, I eventually managed to escape. And in the spring of 1813, I arrived back in France.